The night shift paints everything blue. The lights are dim, the voices softer, the machines quieter, as if even the machines know to hush in the presence of sleeping children. I've come to love that silence, not because it's peaceful, but because it holds things back, like the walls are exhaling, and if you listen closely enough, you can hear what they've been holding in all day. There's a hallway in the West Wing, Pediatric Oncology, that stays colder than the rest of the hospital. No matter the season, no matter how high they crank the heating, you can feel it on your skin. It starts right outside room 209. That's where I spent most of my nights. Room 209, third bed to the right, window side. My name is Sheila. I'm 41 years old, a pediatric nurse of 11 years. People think that kind of time builds strength, but I think it just carves deeper places for grief to hide. I used to laugh easily. Now I smile like I'm afraid someone might notice it's fake. That winter, I was assigned to a little girl named Lila, 7 years old, leukemia, bald as a doll, always clutching this frayed pink bunny like it was the only thing keeping her tethered. Her parents were rarely there, Dad out of the picture, Mom too exhausted to keep showing up just to watch her daughter fade away. So most nights, it was just me and Lila and the quiet. Lila didn't speak much. Instead, she drew. Her crayon collection was her treasure chest. I kept them in the bottom drawer of her bedside cart, all arranged by color, neatly, obsessively. She'd get upset if they were out of order. Once a nurse accidentally mixed up the reds and oranges, and Lila screamed until her IV nearly tore loose. At first, I chalked it up to the usual. Children cope in strange ways, control where they can, but over time, I noticed something off about her drawings. They weren't typical kid stuff, no smiling suns or stick figures, just doors, dozens and dozens of them, some open, some shut, some cracked just enough to show a shadow inside, and always in the corner, a tiny pink bunny, watching. One night, she tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Don't open the green one." I asked her what she meant. She just pointed at a new drawing on the tray table, another hallway just like ours, lit blue, with a single green door at the end. There was something behind it, not drawn clearly, just a dark smear, like the crayon had been pressed too hard and broken. Later that shift, after Lila had fallen asleep, I noticed the crayon drawer was slightly open. I hadn't touched it. The arrangement inside was changed. The greens, usually fourth from the left, were gone. Every last green crayon. I checked the room, even asked if anyone had cleaned while I stepped out. No one had. I let it go, told myself a child had hidden them somewhere, but it lingered in my mind, especially the next night, when I came in and found Lila more alert than usual. Her eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on the corner of the room. "She came," she said, "from the green one." I felt my stomach twist. "Who came, sweetheart?" She just shook her head. "She doesn't like nurses." I looked over at the drawing on the tray. The green door was open now. There was something new in the hallway, a figure, vague and gray and slightly bent. It looked like a woman, but the face had no features, just smudges where the eyes should be. I asked her gently if she'd dreamed it, if maybe the medicine made her feel strange. "She talks to me when you leave," she said. "She's mad because I didn't go." I touched her forehead. Cool, no fever. Her vitals were fine. Still, something about the air in the room made me uneasy. It felt heavier, like we were being watched. 2 nights later, I was charting notes when I heard the crayon drawer slam shut behind me. I turned. Nothing. Lila was asleep, her bunny on her chest, but the drawer was shut. I'd left it open. I was sure of it. I walked over and pulled it out. The greens were back, only they were used. Every single one worn down to nubs, their wrappers torn. I picked up the top one. It felt warm, like it had just been in someone's hand. I didn't sleep that morning when I got home. Couldn't. That night, Lila didn't talk, didn't draw, just stared at the wall. "Is she here?" I asked. Lila blinked once, slowly. Then she said she showed me what's behind the door. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't want to know. The next morning, Lila coded. They tried. God, they tried. But she was gone before sunrise. No pain, no struggle, just gone. Like she'd finally gone through the door. I was the one who packed up her things, folded her tiny pajamas, took her bunny, now oddly heavy, and placed it in a box for her mother. When I opened the crayon drawer, there was only one drawing inside. A hallway again. This time, 5 doors, 4 closed, 1 open, the green one. And in the doorway, not a shadow, but a face, mine. I dropped the paper. The hospital called in a grief counselor, said I was overworked, said this kind of thing can rattle the best of us. Maybe they're right, maybe, but sometimes when I pass room 209, I still feel the cold. And once, just once, I heard that drawer open on its own. I didn't look back. There are things that stay in this hospital, whispers that move when the rest of the world sleeps. I try to forget, but every time I see a green crayon, my hand shakes. Maybe she's still drawing. Maybe that door never really closed. We just think children don't see the things we've trained ourselves to ignore, but they do, and sometimes they draw them. Some places in hospitals never feel clean, no matter how hard you scrub them. The scent of bleach sits heavy in the air, clinging to the corners of rooms where sorrow lingers too long. But in the east wing of our pediatric ward, there's one hallway that smells like nothing. No bleach, no illness, no life, just cold. We called it the dark hallway, not officially of course. On the maps it's labeled as Wing E3, Maintenance Corridor B. It was once used for transporting patients to radiology before the renovations, but now it's sealed on both ends, or at least it's supposed to be. I passed it every shift, and I always walked faster near it. There's no reason for it to feel wrong, but it does. I'm Marcus. I'm 33. I've worked the hospital's night janitorial shift for 7 years, mostly mopping, trash removal, restocking supply closets. People think custodians are invisible, but we see everything. We're the last ones in every room, and the ones who find what's left behind. I used to believe there was nothing I couldn't explain until last October. I'd been assigned the lower pediatric wing that month. The first few nights were uneventful, same routines, but the dark hallway had been bothering me more than usual. I noticed the door at the end was cracked open, just enough to let a sliver of shadow through. I asked maintenance why it wasn't sealed like it should be. They shrugged, claimed it was sealed weeks ago and shouldn't be accessible from either end. That night, after the third round of trash collection, I passed the hallway again. This time the door was wide open. There were no lights inside, only a long black stretch of tile and walls. I stood still for a moment. Something about it pulled at me. Not a sound or a voice, just a feeling, like someone had been waiting. I closed the door and pushed a supply cart in front of it, just to be safe. Around 3 a.m. I was mopping the floor near ICUP when I heard a whisper. It wasn't close. It came from the hallway I'd blocked. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a vent, but something in me went cold. I went back. The cart had been moved, just a few inches. The door was open again. I didn't report it. Who would I tell? No one takes the night crew seriously. We're the ghosts before the actual ghosts come out. The following night, I saw a child standing inside the hallway. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Pale skin, bare feet, a hospital gown hanging too loose off his frame. He stood just past the doorway, looking out but not stepping forward. His eyes were black, not dark, not shadowed, just black, completely. I froze, called out, "Hey buddy, are you lost?" He didn't respond. He turned, slowly, and walked backward into the darkness. I took one step forward before my legs stopped working, not from fear, but from something else, like the air itself was thick, pushing against me. I looked down. My shoes were wet. The floor was dry when I walked in. I hadn't mopped that area yet. The water had formed small footprints, leading out of the hallway. I never told anyone about the child. I started leaving that corridor alone. If I passed it, I looked away. If I heard something, I ignored it, but that didn't make it stop. A week later, a new patient arrived. A little girl, Emma, I think, 6 years old, brain tumor. The nurses said she barely spoke, except to say one thing: he's still walking. When asked who, she'd just say, "The boy in the dark place, the dark place." I cleaned her room once. She was asleep, or at least I thought she was. As I turned to leave, she whispered without opening her eyes, "He doesn't like when you look at him." That night, I stayed late to help with a spill in the ward kitchen. I passed the hallway again. I didn't mean to look, but I did. The lights inside flickered. I know they weren't supposed to work. No electricity's been routed there for years. But for a moment, they did. In that flicker, I saw the hallway full of children, lining the walls, all barefoot, all silent, all staring at me, and then they were gone. I vomited in the stairwell. I tried to quit the next day. HR told me they were short-staffed. That night crews were hard to come by. I stayed. Bills don't care about ghosts. A month later, Emma died. She passed in her sleep. Peaceful, they said, but I saw her that night, right before shift change. She was awake, sitting up, staring out the window. "I can hear him walking again," she said. I asked her where. "In the walls." She died 4 hours later. I cleaned her room afterward. No one else wanted to. The sheets were cold, still tucked in. Her chart lay untouched on the tray. But on the wall, above her bed, someone had drawn a doorway. A child's drawing, thick crayon strokes, black. We don't keep crayons in ICU. No one knew where it came from. That same night, I walked past the hallway, one last time. The door was gone. Not closed, not locked. Gone. Just smooth white wall where it used to be. I've asked others about that corridor. Some remember it, some don't. One nurse told me there never was a hallway there. Maintenance sealed it off years before she started. When I asked if she remembered sealing the entrance, she said, "What entrance?" But I still see it sometimes. Not the door, but the lights. Just a faint flicker behind the wall, like something still walks, something that never stopped walking. When I dream, it's always the same. I'm in that hallway. It stretches forever, but I know there's an end. And at that end, something waits. Not angry, just patient. Maybe the boy's still in there. Maybe they all are. And maybe one day, I'll stop walking too. Hospitals have wings, but some don't heal. Some just grow quiet enough to listen. And the hallway with no lights, it's always listening. There's a silence in hospital rooms at 2:37 a.m. that doesn't belong anywhere else. Not just quiet, but the kind that feels like the air is waiting. It presses in on your skin. It makes you hesitate before turning a corner, makes you glance at things twice, even if they haven't moved. I've worked night shifts for over a decade, and still when the clock hits 2:37, I stop humming. I listen, because that's when it happened. My name is Janice. I'm 41, a pediatric nurse since I was 23. I've worked in 3 hospitals, seen hundreds of children come and go, and some never leave your mind. I used to be softer, used to decorate my station with cartoon stickers, read bedtime stories after meds, braid hair. Somewhere along the way, I stopped doing that. Not because I stopped caring, but because I started seeing too much. There's one child I never forget, though no one else remembers her. Her name was Eerie. It started with a wristband. I was finishing up my rounds in the oncology wing. Room 12B had been cleared the week before. A long-term patient, Abigail, had passed quietly in her sleep. Her things were packed, the room sanitized. It was scheduled for a repaint before the next admission. But that night, I walked past it and saw movement inside. The lamp was on, soft yellow light spilling onto the floor. The bed was occupied. I paused, checked the schedule. The room was still marked as vacant. I opened the door slowly. A little girl sat upright in the bed, pale, thin, her hands folded neatly in her lap. No IV, no chart at the end of the bed. She didn't look at me, just stared forward like she hadn't noticed I was there. I cleared my throat. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your name?" She didn't answer. I stepped in slowly, looking for a nurse call slip, a check-in, anything. Then I noticed the hospital wristband on her left arm. Her eyes were open too wide, like she was trying to take in everything at once. She blinked once, slow, heavy, not scared, not upset, just aware. I leaned forward, reading the band. Evelyn M. No birth date, no ID number, just a name. She smiled when I said it aloud. "Evie." Her voice was whisper thin. "You remember." I didn't know what she meant. I stood up straight and told her I'd go check the nurse's desk for her file. She didn't move, just whispered again as I backed out the room. "You always forget." I went to the desk. No new admittance, no transfer, no Evelyn M. listed in the hospital system. I went back to the room. It was empty. The bed was neatly made, lights off, no trace of anyone being there. I didn't mention it. Not then. You start talking about ghosts on the pediatric floor, and you get reassigned or worse, sent home with a counseling pamphlet. But it didn't stop. Every night, around the same time, I'd pass 12B. The light would be on, just a dim bedside lamp, and some nights I'd find her there again, always in the same pose, always the same soft smile. Each time I saw her, I read the wristband again. Evelyn M. It started to eat at me. I searched our archives. Nothing. No Evelyn M. in the last 20 years. So I tried something else. I brought an old chart clipboard, something from a discharge room, pretended I was doing rounds, walked into 12B one night, acting like I was just doing my job. "Evie," I said, "can you tell me your last name?" She blinked. "You knew it once." I wrote that down. "How old are you?" "I used to be 7, she said. "I think I still am. What happened to you?" She turned her head toward the window. I was left behind. By then my hands were shaking. I left the room. The next day, I found an old photo in our break room. We keep war collages of past patients, especially the ones who fought hard. In a bottom corner, behind a coffee stain, I saw her, Evie. It was her, same face, same eyes. I peeled the corner of the picture back. The date read, 1989. Evie had been a patient here over 30 years ago. When I brought it up to the head nurse, she nodded slowly. Yes, Evelyn, I heard stories about her when I started. They say she was admitted for leukemia. No family ever visited. No one ever claimed her body. I asked what happened to her file. She frowned. It's strange. It was removed from the system years ago. HIPAA cleanup or something. But some say it wasn't an accident. That night, I went to room 12B with a stuffed bear. Something soft, something real. She was already waiting. I set the bear on her lap. You don't have to stay here, I told her. You can go. She looked down at the bear, then back up. I'm afraid if I leave, I'll stop existing. You'll be remembered, I said. She shook her head. You'll forget again. You always do. I told her I wouldn't, that I'd write her name down. She held out her wrist, then read it one more time. I leaned forward, but the name had changed. The wristband now read, Janice R. My name, not hers. She looked at me, and her smile cracked, just a little. You see, they all fade. Eventually, I stumbled backward out of the room. The light flickered once, and then darkness. Since then, I don't walk near 12B at night. It's been repainted, renamed, assigned to short-stay patients. They say the light flickers sometimes for no reason. The maintenance crew has rewired the outlet twice. Sometimes I feel like someone's tugging at my sleeve when I'm alone in a hallway, like a child trying to get my attention. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear her voice whispering, "You always forget." So I keep the photo. I laminated it and hid it behind my locker mirror. And every night, before my shift, I say her name, Evelyn M., because I don't want to forget, because I think forgetting is the real death, and because somewhere, maybe just beyond the walls, she's still waiting to be remembered, and I remember, at least I try. Every time the clock hits 2:37, I pause, and I say it again, Evelyn M., just in case the silence is listening. There's something about the sound of music in a hospital that feels wrong, especially when it comes from nowhere. No radio, no intercom, just a soft tune, fragile as breath, floating through sterile air. I used to think I imagined it, the way tired minds make things up to stay awake. But when I started hearing the lullaby on the 3rd floor, I knew it wasn't my imagination. It was always the same melody, slow and old, like something you'd find on a forgotten music box. I've worked here for 12 years. My name is Sonia. I'm 38, night shift pediatric nurse. I've never married, never had children. Maybe that's why I stayed in this wing longer than most. They say it gets to you eventually. The crying, the goodbyes, the tiny hands letting go. But I stayed, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of a need I didn't understand. The room that changed me was 9C. It's tucked into the north end of the floor, no windows, used mostly for overflow patients, short-term recovery. I'd passed it 100 times without thought, until one night, when I heard the song. It was near the end of my shift, around 3:10 a.m. The hallway was dark. I'd finished vitals and was logging notes at the desk. That's when I heard it, the melody, faint and lilting, almost underwater in its softness. I followed it down the hall. It was coming from room 9C. The door was ajar, just enough to spill a line of pale light onto the tiles. I pushed it open. The room was empty. No patient, no visitors, but the crib was set up, unused, untouched, rocking gently on its own. I stood in the doorway, rooted. The lullaby stopped. The room went still. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe someone left a music toy in there. I checked the drawers beneath the crib, even the cabinet by the sink. Nothing. I backed out, turned off the light, left the door open just a crack. The next night, I passed by again, and again the music, only this time, the crib wasn't empty. A small stuffed rabbit sat inside it, gray and worn, with one button eye. I didn't put it there, neither did anyone on staff. I asked around the next day. No one claimed it. One nurse even joked, "Must be left by one of your ghosts, Sonia." I didn't laugh. I tried ignoring the room after that, avoided it, but something changed in me. I started hearing soft cries in places there were no children. I started feeling a kind of pressure in my chest when walking past 9C, like someone was waiting behind the door. Then came the night I forgot to check the IV in 8B. I was overwhelmed, short-staffed, and the alarms were silent. When I finally made it in, the child Gabriel was pale, sweating, his line had clotted, his fever was high. We managed to stabilize him, but I couldn't forgive myself. I sat in the break room afterward, my hands trembling. I wasn't crying, I think I was too numb to. That's when I heard the lullaby again, clear, sweet, beckoning. I stood up and followed it, knowing exactly where it was coming from. Room 9C. The light was on again, the door slightly open. This time I stepped inside. The rabbit was gone, but there was a girl sitting on the floor, her back to me. She had shoulder-length black hair and was wearing a hospital gown with faded ducklings on it. "Sweetheart," I said. She didn't turn, just kept humming the lullaby. I stepped closer. "Are you lost? What's your name?" She stopped humming. In a flat, quiet voice, she said, "They leave you when you cry too much." I froze. "What do you mean?" She turned her head. Her eyes were glassy, far off. "They always say they'll come back," she whispered, "but they never do." "Where are your parents?" I asked. She looked at the crib. "They said I was too loud, too sick." I stepped toward her. My breath caught. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. I reached for my badge, ready to call security, but my fingers moved through thin air. The girl was gone. So was the light. The room was empty again. No crib, no rabbit, just darkness. I left immediately, went to the supply closet, and sat on a stool until sunrise. I couldn't explain what I'd seen. I didn't try. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. When I closed my eyes, I'd hear humming. Sometimes I'd wake with the weight of a child's breath on my cheek. Then a few nights later, I returned to the hall after a coffee run. One of my newer nurses, Taylor, was standing by room 9C, pale as the walls. She asked for you." Taylor stammered. "Who?" I asked, already knowing. "The girl." She said her name was Lila. I felt like my heart had stopped. Lila. That name meant something. I ran to the archives, sifted through dusty records from before the digital system. There it was. Lila J., admitted in severe chronic illness, multiple readmissions, parents listed as unknown, discharged to no one, presumed deceased. A footnote read, "Child often cried when left alone. Parents never returned." The room listed, "Dicey." I started bringing flowers to the windowsill outside the room. I'd sit there during breaks and read aloud, just soft poems or fairy tales. Sometimes when I read, I'd hear the music start, just a few notes. Sometimes I'd see the rabbit again, placed neatly on the crib. She never appeared to me again, but I knew she listened, and I hoped it made a difference. Now every time a child passes away on our floor, I place a paper crane in 9C. I leave the door slightly ajar. It's my way of saying, "You are not forgotten, you are not too loud, you are not too sick," and someone stayed. I think that's what Lila needed, just someone who didn't leave. Now and then, when things go quiet around 3:10, the lullaby plays. It drifts like mist, barely touching the ears, but you feel it in your heart, and when I hear it, I whisper back, "I'm still here," just in case she's still listening, and I think she is.
Hospitals have strange corners, places people forget, spaces that don't show up on blueprints anymore, but still exist in memory. Every hospital I've worked in has had at least one, but here, it's the waiting chair. Just one chair, beige, vinyl, torn at the corner. It sits at the far end of the oncology wing, tucked beside the emergency stairwell, too far from the nurse's station, not near any patient rooms. It doesn't belong there, but nobody moves it. My name's Mark. I'm an oncology nurse. Been on the night shift for 9 years. I've seen things you wouldn't believe, things that break your heart, things that make you grateful for every breath, and sometimes things that make you question whether you're still sane. The waiting chair used to be a joke between staff, the haunted throne, they called it. If you sat there, you'd have bad luck. IV lines would tangle, codes would call, families would scream. It was just a piece of furniture, but no one used it. Not really, except sometimes people did. I first noticed it during a late shift last winter. Around 2:30 a.m., I was checking vitals in 12D. When I stepped back out into the hallway, I saw a man sitting in the chair, middle-aged, thin, wearing a gray sweater with fraying cuffs, hands folded in his lap. At first I thought he was a family member, someone waiting out a long night. I approached, polite as always. "Sir, are you here with someone? This area's restricted at night." He looked up slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "She's almost gone," he said. "Who is?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked toward the far hallway, where our terminal patients were. Then he stood, Without a word, he turned and walked toward the stairwell. I followed, but when I opened the door, the stairs were empty, gone. I checked the security log the next morning. No visitor badge, no entry record. That was the first time, not the last. A few weeks later, another nurse saw a little boy sitting in the chair, alone, swinging his feet. She thought he was lost. When she asked where his parents were, he said they left before I got better. Then he disappeared around the corner and never showed up on camera. By then, the older nurses had stopped joking about the chair. One of them, Elise, told me she'd seen it move once, not far, just a few inches toward the door, like it wanted to leave, or like something wanted it closer, she whispered. We started calling it the waiting chair for real after that. I began to notice a pattern. People saw the chair when they were close to burnout, when they hadn't slept in days, when they'd lost a patient they got too attached to, and always at night, always when the halls were too quiet. Sometimes, I'd walk past it and swear it had been turned slightly, angled toward a room that didn't have anyone in it. Once, I found it facing the wall, like it was hiding. I started dreaming about it. In the dreams, I'd be walking the hall, but the lights would flicker. Every time I looked back, the chair was closer. Then I'd blink, and I'd be sitting in it, unable to move, just waiting. But waiting for what? I never knew. Then came the night I made the mistake of sitting in it. It had been a brutal shift. A teenage girl named Brielle had coded twice before passing just after midnight. I'd known her for months. She liked sketching in her notebook, mostly trees, sometimes angels. Her mum held her hand and whispered, "It's okay to rest." I'd helped clean the room afterward, stripped the bed, folded the gown, packed up the personal items in silence. Afterward, I walked the hall in a daze. My head hurt, my chest ached, and then I saw the chair, empty, beckoning. I told myself it was just a seat. I sat down. The vinyl was cold. The light above flickered once, then steadied, and then everything went quiet. Too quiet. No machine hums, no footsteps. I looked around. The hallway had changed. No patients, no nurses, just me and the chair. And then I heard breathing, not mine, shallow, close, right beside me. I turned my head slowly. There, in the space next to the chair, stood Brielle. She didn't look like the girl I'd known. Her eyes were hollow, her skin gray, but she smiled. I waited. She said softly, "You came." I couldn't speak. Her hand reached out. I stood up fast. The moment I did, everything snapped back. Machines beeped again. A gurney squeaked somewhere. A nurse laughed faintly down the hall, but my knees were weak, and I never sat in that chair again. After that night, the dreams stopped, but something else started. I began finding drawings outside the patient rooms, small sketches on paper scraps, trees, angels, a single chair, always the chair. Once, a drawing showed me, sitting in it. The paper was folded neatly under the leg of the chair, as if it had been placed there deliberately. I brought it home. I don't know why. Sometimes I stare at it and wonder if the chair is part of the hospital or something older, something that exists where grief and time get twisted together, a place where the dead wait for someone to remember them, a place where the living sit when they're too tired to go on. I've tried reporting it. Maintenance says it's not even on their inventory. Security says the stairwell camera near it always glitches. Some nights I pass by and it's gone, only to reappear the next shift. Once, I found a new nurse crying beside it. She didn't know why. She said she'd just felt something sitting in the chair, something heavy, like sadness that wasn't mine, she whispered. I believed her. We all do. Now we leave it alone. We never move it, never clean it. It just is. Sometimes, when a patient passes, we find the chair pulled a little closer to their door. Sometimes, when the night is particularly long, I think about sitting in it again. But I don't, because I know now, whatever sits in that chair doesn't always leave. And once you've waited long enough, something eventually sits with you, and it might never let go.